on an isolated island. What can two guys do? They only need to monitor and place traps each day across the island. On this island, there are several day and night monsters, so once night strikes, the two men are always in terror. John, a meteorologist, decides to take up the station master's duties on the brink of World War I to find quiet and escape the commotion. When John crosses the ocean, he brings a shipload of provisions with him to the island. The island was remote, empty, and unsettling to view. He wasn't the only one on the island. Of course, there was a part-time housekeeper as well. They resided in two homes, which afterwards served as the only two structures on the island. The weatherman's cottage was where the captain led him. However, the veteran weatherman was nowhere to be seen when he was ready to switch duties. They had to go to the lighthouse keeper when they arrived since it had been uninhabited for a very long period. They thought that was quite unusual. It was encircled by pointed particles like a castle on defense. The old lighthouse keeper was unkempt. The weatherman had long since passed away from typhoid disease, according to Brian, and his remains were already in the water. John wanted to live a calm life away from the baptism of war. Even though all the strange occurrences suggested that the island was not secure, he declined the captain's offer to take him back and decided to remain on the island. But after only packing his food and stuff, this was the start of his nightmare. The night before he moved into the observer's cabin, John sat in front of the fire and reviewed the previous observer's notes. The observer had lately passed away from a disease, according to Brian's account. And there were many things in his notes that John couldn't comprehend, as well as a photo of a woman's wedding gown. The door was knocked at that very moment. He was going to open the door since he assumed it was the lighthouse keeper when he noticed a blue tentacle protruding from the opening. John put his foot through it in his rush before realizing something was amiss and becoming alarmed. He quickly went into hiding in the cellar where he could hear footsteps. When John peered through the opening to see what was happening outside, something did enter his chamber. In his despair, a creature immediately materialized in the opening. John spent the night in anxiety and dread after stabbing his eye with a knife. When the sun rose the following morning, John carefully emerged from the cellar and saw the chamber in disarray outside. The monster's feet were all over the beach. Brian was requested, so he went to the lighthouse to get it, but was rejected. He was forced to rely only on himself. It's a good thing John had extra ammo when he arrived on the island. He created a quick gasoline-sprinkled defense around the home and strengthened the cabin's doors and windows. As anticipated, darkness descended. The creatures showed up again, from the water to the coast. They were observed creeping, with foes on all sides. The monsters rapidly overcame the crude fortifications outside the home. John was unable to flee. He started a fire outside the door out of despair. The fisherman was effectively repulsed despite the fire's quick progress. John managed to avoid a calamity, but he also suffered significant financial loss because the island's fire consumed both of his options for shelter. John reflected after spending the night on the beach. If Brian won't assist, I won't help. He was holding his revolver by the spring waiting for Brian to show up when all of a sudden a toad-faced creature emerged next to him. But while engaged in combat, they came into a creature with a hideous face. Lance was prepared to shoot the ground when John took it up. Present time, Brian, the lighthouse keeper, approached him and begged him to spare the toad's face. It seems that Brian has been keeping this toad face like a pet in exchange. Through Brian's introduction, he was given the assurance that he could move into the lighthouse. John found out that the monster with the toad face originated from the neighboring water. His friend was the one who attacked him. To them, they attempt to eject humans from this island because they are an intrusion. By all means, the fisherman the hero encountered along the route has been domesticated and is now his pet. Submissive, because the lighthouse keeper routinely treats her and the other female violently. The woman is quite scared of Brian. Brian and Julie also share an illogical connection. According to Brian, monsters attempt to capture the lighthouse every night. Then, you must team up with me to fend off their assaults. The combat was ready to start after a count of the remaining ammo. It seems bizarre when night sets and Toad's visage changes. The monsters start to materialize thickly and rush toward the lighthouse not far from the coast. John made a mistake at this crucial time. Brian immediately dragged him away from the entrance as he fled in fear to the tower. John is on his own to deal with the excessive quantity of fishermen. When Brian unlocked the door the next day, he observed John lying bloodied on the ground. He gave Brian a scolding. John and Brian's relationship improved as a result. He eventually started to want life to go back to normal. Julie was usually following John as he went looking for valuable goods. Although he had sympathy for Julie, John gradually started to feel something for her. John created a boat out of bones after noticing what she was contemplating. Julie drove him to a location on the island after spotting how the boat seemed. A boat was trapped here. When John returned, he asked the lighthouse keeper where the boat had come from. When a ship carrying explosives went by, he informed her that it was doing so. Tragically, the passengers on board died and remained behind. It just so happened that they were going to run out of ammo, and it was the fisherman's rest hour. John decided to remove the explosives by diving into the ocean's depths. John left the wreck, put on a bulky diving suit, and descended to the ocean's depths to gently draw the explosives back through the hooks to the ship. After the final explosives box was, John plummeted while wearing a bulky diving outfit, but at the bottom of the ocean, he was unable to stand. When John's life was in danger, he tried to draw the rope to Brian for assistance, but Brian was distracted by a full load of explosives that might have torn out his heart and disregarded John. He was saved by the aquatic monster. Back at the lighthouse, he was able to regain his life. They started assessing the state of the. Fortunately, there was an explosives box that had not been damaged by the sea. They purchased explosives close to the lighthouse, attached the line, and waited for the fisherman to arrive. The fisherman vanished for several days. All of it was Brian's fault. Brian compelled Julie to call out to her kind after leaving the lighthouse door open. As soon as the yell pierced the sky, innumerable fishermen descended towards the lighthouse, one after another, and saw yet another assault. The lighthouse staff had linked the explosives to a line at this point, causing an immediate explosion to begin. Numerous fishermen instantaneously became dead bodies. John and Brian executed all who did not perish after dawn. John wanted to give up as he observed the dying spouses. After the struggle yesterday night, Brian murdered them. At night, the toad's face was gone. Instead of continuing their onslaught, the monsters let forth a wail that engulfed the entire island. John was shocked to discover the fishermen floating on the sea's surface early in the morning. They chose not to assault it this time. It became out that they were honoring their deceased friends. John felt very bad. He erected a gravestone on the sand with Julie's favorite plaything, a bone boat. In the center of it, he discovered the boat had been stolen in the evening. To demonstrate that he wasn't antagonistic, he put down his torch. It turns out that Toadface is the leader of this bunch of fish people, since there are other monsters on the side, including Toadface. These fish people now feel John's friendliness and do not aim to assault him. But then the lighthouse keeper arrived out of nowhere. He ascended the lighthouse using the last of the gunpowder to fight the creatures, since he was unable to accept Toadface left himself. As soon as John noticed this, he moved forward to put a stop to it. John yelled out Brian's true name throughout the exchange. His visitor had a point. The final observer survived. On the other hand, the fish quickly surrounded him and ate his body. Police officer and a second weather observer visited the island one day. They are traveling to look for the retired weatherman. And much like Brian, John now resembled a scruffy lighthouse keeper. The response was still death by typhoid when the new chief asked where the weatherman was. The fisherman stopped attempting to assault once the lighthouse keeper passed away. To protect the fisherman and the island lighthouse, John decided to stay on the island.